Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
The travel abroad was so fun.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a type of visit abroad called a presidential delegation. So a presidential delegation is the president chooses not to attend this event, somewhere in the world. Usually it's a ceremonial event, and instead appoints a cabinet secretary or sometimes a former president to go on his behalf. Because the diplomatic relationship is important, and he wants to. The U.S. needs to have a presence beyond just our ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
So those were some of the funnest times. I remember my first trip was my boss walked around the corner and said, "Hey, you're going to Kosovo," and I couldn't even point it out Kosovo on a map for sure. But I was thrilled. So we got on a military jet. We took all these special air missions on these various places and went to Kosovo. It was a great delegation. I know the Kosovars really appreciated it. The funny component about that, and it was such a perfect kind of training wheels moment. So the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development of HUD, Alfonso Jackson, was the secretary leading that delegation. So we get there and we do our thing, and we go back to the airport to get on the jet, and the pilots told us, or the Air Force was saying, "Hey, there's a hard break, quote unquote, hard break on the plane, so it's going to be a little while." So essentially, the axle broke, or I don't know whether there's an axle on a plane, but something bad happened, and so we had to deliver this to the secretary. So he got really angry, and I'm sorry, your military jet is broken. So here we are. I mean, there's like. What was like 3:00 in the afternoon there. So it was like, early in the morning here. It was early in the day there. So it must have been, early in the morning here. So the secretary was getting irate and that we couldn't solve the problem. And he threatened to call Donald Rumsfeld. And they were like, no, you do not need to call the Secretary of Defense. Like, we will resolve this. So we called the Air Force and said, "Hey, you guys have a flight that we could just hop on and, whatever." So turns out this admiral gave us his small jet, took us to Ramstein Air Force Base. Ramstein Air Force Base is in Germany. So we jumped on this really large medevac flight, a C-7, I think it's like those really large planes, but it was full of wounded soldiers. So coming back from Iraq. So it was a sobering flight back. And
wow.
We I think they even waited for us. It was terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, so they had all these wounded soldiers.
How many would have been in your party? 15, 20? Or?
No, so we were 8.
Oh, okay.
6 to 8.
Okay. And who was the senior position? Who was the senior guy or gal in your party?
The Secretary of HUD. Yeah, so Housing and Development. Yeah, so cabinet secretary level.
Okay, gotcha.
But it would be all kinds of individuals. The administration, I thought, and I think other administrations have done this as well, picked a good delegation that represents the United States well and is appropriate for the ceremonial event abroad. So it would be a mix of, a notable leader, usually a former president or cabinet secretary, but also a really interesting mix of Americans. So, for example, we went to the inauguration of the president of the Dominican Republic, and Ernie Banks came with us. Because he's a big baseball player, and the Dominican Republic is known for their baseball. And
absolutely.
So
So they would do things like that is clearly like for just fitting the right person for the occasion.
Right.
I see.
Almost like a diplomatic gesture. Like, we're sending Ernie Banks as a part of this delegation because it's sending the right message, and we wanted to honor you, Mr. President, and your inauguration.
That's cool.
Yeah. So.
Did you intermingle with those wounded soldiers coming home?
A lot, yeah.
Oh, yeah? You can have conversations with them?
Had conversations. Yeah, the ones that, some were, of course, not awake.
Yeah.
But, it was it was actually really fitting because the secretary was irate. But once he boarded that plane, there was such a sense of humility that it helped us just logistically. But it kind of put him into a place where he needed to be.
Do you miss working in the government?
There are times where I miss it, because it felt very meaningful, and it felt big, in that you were, especially when I was coordinating like visits like abroad, and then also when you're executing a visit from a head of state or head of government, so a president or prime minister or a king or queen, it felt really meaningful in that you were contributing to diplomacy. Like you in technical ways, you had a diplomatic passport. You were playing the role of a diplomat. So because you were the main linchpin that made that visit work or not work, you were literally executing that visit, and you were the main U.S. liaison. It felt really meaningful and intentional. And honestly, it was their first diplomatic experience with their visit to the United States.
Oh, wow.
So I miss it from that perspective.
It seems like it would be such a rush, like to be involved at that level, to be close to the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's phenomenal.
And then you have other nations, like heads of states, like national leaders who are going to come and visit your national leader, and you're involved with that somehow, and you can kind of see democracy and like world governments in person. It seems like it'd be a rush.
Yeah, it was a front row seat to international relations, honestly. Yeah. Which is why I went after that and got a master's in international relations. I kind of got the book learning after the real world learning.
Right.
But yeah, you saw how diplomacy happened.
Yeah.
You were on the front row. I remember, for example, just like perspectives it's all life's about perspectives, right? Same is true for visiting heads of state. So I think the president of Nigeria was visiting, and he was about to enter the Oval Office. He was dressed from head to toe in his garb. I mean, he looked like an African leader. Yep. Which was what he thought was appropriate, which was perfectly appropriate. But the Oval Office doors swung open, and President Bush was surprised, and he said, "Hey, look at you!" And
He was not expecting that.
I thought to myself, I should have told him
right.
This was going to be. He might not have responded that way. But yeah, it was fun to watch all that happen and actually see the dialogue.
I'm sure. So in a case like that, why were you present?
You were basically leading them through the White House, and
you were.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and just kind of literally making the visit work. All the questions that come up, and what do I say to the president, and what's the agenda for the meeting? All those things are communicated ahead of time.
Yep.
Really start with a visit to the U.S. to the embassy in Washington. So that visit starts with what are the White House objectives for the visit, and what are the visiting head of state or head of government, what is their objectives? So it gets fleshed out. So you're really there from start to finish.